Abby. I'm a teenager here at ACC, and today is Orphan Sunday. This is something I've been organizing with Mr. Shane and Miss Jennifer Barnhart for a while now with the missions program, but it also goes back to CIY, which is our Christ and Youth Conference that the high school students go to. Excuse me. Every year, they do a new offering, and this past year was with CAFO, which is the Christian Alliance for Orphans in Foster Care, and that was the main focus of CIY this week, and at the end of every week, they allow every student to take a Kingdom Worker card, which is like a challenge for Kingdom Work, for God's work in your church or your community. You're not made to take one, and you don't have to take one. But I did, and I prayed before I opened it, because opening it, it's accepting the challenge. But I opened it, and my challenge was to organize an Orphan Sunday event. So here we are. I'm excited. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to everyone who brought clothes. These will be put to good use. And thank you for joining us to just learn about what God says about children and orphans in foster care and how you can help with these children. I have Miss Julie Washington with me today. Her family has been involved in foster care, and I've just got a few questions for her.
Put me on the spot.
So
I haven't seen these questions, so I don't know.
So why did you and your family decide to foster and then adopt?
So a lot of people, you know our family. We have 5 kids. I had a lot of trouble with pregnancies. I lost several pregnancies, and then was on bed rest with both of the girls for a long time. And I knew that after having Ryan that we weren't done. Like, I just felt like a, space. I just had a longing to have more children, but we knew that us trying to have a biological child, another one, was not the smartest thing. So we started looking into adoption, and infant adoption, private adoption is very, very expensive. So we knew that we're normal people. We work normal jobs. Like, we don't have $50,000 to adopt a baby. And then we started looking into foster care and, seeing the faces of the children that are, in foster care and up for adoption. Once you see those faces and you actually put names to the numbers that you hear about, it was something that we just couldn't turn away from. So we decided to adopt. And honestly, we went into it thinking we would adopt one child. And then, we kind of talked about the options, like if they have a sibling, what are we going to do? So we said, well, we could do 2. God has bigger plans than we did, and we brought home 3 little boys that had been in foster care pretty much their whole lives. Cam was born into foster care. Mikey had been in foster care for 3 years when we brought him home. So, I guess that's why. We just decided we had space. We had a big house. We felt the longing to have more children and went with foster care. That kind of rambled, sorry.
How has that decision impacted your lives as Christians?
Well, it's impacted our lives in a lot of ways. You just realize how fortunate you are. It makes you very grateful for the people that surround you and the village that we have, which is through church. We don't have great families that support us with a lot of this, so our church family is our family. And honestly, when you go through tough things, you learn about who the people are that care about you and that love you.
And if there's anyone here who is considering being involved in the foster care system, what advice do you have for them?
It doesn't take special parents or extraordinary parents. It just takes average parents to be a family for the kids in foster care. We struggle with the same things that everybody else struggles with. We struggle with paying bills and homework and, all of that. And you don't have to be a young family. You can be, anybody can foster. Honestly, there needs to be more foster parents. If you can, all your kids can be grown and you can foster a teenager. Like once the kids get above about age 5, they're extremely hard to place because people want cute little babies, not the kids that really need homes. So if you're, even considering it, or it doesn't take a lot. The kids just need somebody that's going to be there and put them in bed at night and make sure that they have a meal on the table every day. It doesn't take anything special. And then if you feel like you can't foster, you just can't do it, support the people that are fostering. I mean, we've had our boys for 4 years and we still struggle with some things. The Glasses bought us all our school supplies this year. And that was like a huge blessing because, we're buying school clothes and school shoes for 5 kids, and school supplies are very expensive. And we didn't ask for it, they just did it. And, we still need that. Foster families still need that after several years. It doesn't take much. Just kind of, ask what they need or just help. Even babysitting is a big deal too. So, if you want to babysit.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Okay, so Miss Julie talked about Hard to Place. That's actually the name of a short film that we're going to be offering for all of you to watch tonight at 5 o'clock. But the short film was actually part of my Kingdom Worker card. It wasn't mandatory, but I'd actually talked to some friends after we watched the video, before I'd even gotten my Kingdom Worker card, about we should get this shown at our church. We should try to get this shown, and God works in those kind of ways, because when I opened my Kingdom Worker card and at the bottom it said, try to get the film shown, I was like, okay. So we're going to have that tonight at 5 o'clock, but we have a trailer for you to watch now. So, and just know that it can be sensitive, but I think it's worth watching. So, I'll look at the trailer now.
It's okay. It's me. I want to get out of here. He's gonna find us again. Not this time. But the woods are scary. They are. But they're not here.
Nick! Emma! Kids!
Emma, we need to go to the cars.
Come on, kids! Make a good choice. 1, 2, 3!
No.
I just want you kids to come on back home with me. We can be a family.
The video is based on a true story of 2 children. It could be the story of the 2,251 children waiting to be adopted in the state of Georgia alone. You were handed a card as you came in today, and you'll see on the screen as we go through our time pictures of some of those children. There is a ministry that is trying to get each child covered in prayer, trying to have the church today, all throughout Georgia, pray for those kids. Why talk about this? Why take time on a Sunday to talk about foster care? Why take the time to address this? I mean, as a church, we obviously already know 5 children in that. Isn't that enough? Why should we even care? What does that have to do with the church? What does that have to do with you as a Christ follower? Well, from the very beginning, from the plain, basic, down to an easiest explanation, is that as a Christ follower, we are commanded to care for the widows and orphans. We're commanded. Jesus' brother wrote these words: pure and genuine religion in the sight of God the Father means caring for the orphans and widows in their distress and refusing to let the world corrupt you. God's words are recorded by the prophet Isaiah when he says, "Learn to do good, seek justice, help the oppressed, defend the cause of the orphans, fight for the right of widows." Now, when we define orphan, the simple definition, of course, is a child whose parents have passed away. I think it is okay to expand that to include children whose parents have neglected them in one form or fashion, where the child is no longer safe to be with them. And so we are told and commanded to do that. We are also people who share the heart of God. The Apostle Paul writes, "And this hope will not lead to disappointment, for we know how clearly God loves us, because he has given us the Holy Spirit to fill our hearts with his love." We care because his Spirit is alive in us, and our hearts should break over what breaks his. Since we have God dwelling in us, the Holy Spirit, God's presence in us, Jesus called it the counselor to guide you. If we have that in us, then our heart should break with what breaks his. Paul continues, "Those who are dominated by the sinful nature think about sinful things. But those who are controlled by the Holy Spirit think about things that pleases the Spirit. But you are not controlled by your sinful nature. You are controlled by the Spirit if you have the Spirit of God living in you. And remember that those who do not have the Spirit of Christ living in them do not belong to him at all." The Apostle Paul is pointing out that we should be like God, since we have God in us. We should be motivated about the things that God is motivated about. To have God's heart means to imitate him. Paul writes in a different place, "Imitate God, therefore, in everything you do, because you are his dear children. Live a life filled with love. Follow the example of Christ. He loved us and offered himself as a sacrifice for us, a pleasing aroma to God." We are to imitate God. We are hardwired as humans to be people who imitate others. How do children learn? By imitating. It's interesting. Science teaches us that the same part of the brain that allows a little child to copy the same actions you make, like sticking out your tongue, that same copying is the same part of the brain where a child will develop empathy. That is how to relate to others. That is the way God made us. We are to imitate him. Now, we know that as someone imitates someone else, they don't do it perfectly at the beginning, do they? Take little Shay. When we got little Shay, she was 19 months old, and she could say 3 words. She could say no, and then bad baby. That's all she knew how to say. That's it. That was her whole vocabulary. That means that's all she had heard was no and bad baby. By her age, she should have been talking more than that. Now, she talks all the time. She's still at that stage at 3 that the older brothers enjoy having her repeat things that she probably shouldn't say. That's what happens when you have 4 older brothers and an older sister. But she didn't start to be able to communicate like that. It took a while, and it was frustrating because all she knew how to do was scream. Well, she still screams. But man, some of those nights. But as she continued to imitate the love that she saw and the way we were able to use verbal communication, she's gotten better. As we hang out with Jesus and we try to imitate him, we will become more forgiving. We're not as forgiving as we need to be, but the more we hang out with him, the better we become. The more we hang out with Jesus, the more patient we'll be. We're not there. The more we hang out with Jesus, the more we'll be like him. Which means maybe our heart doesn't break for what he breaks for. Maybe we don't really care. But the more we spend with Jesus, the more we will. You see, the God we imitate is a God who cares. Father to the fatherless, defender of the widow. This is God. He ensures the widows and orphans receive justice. He shows love to the foreign living among you. He gives them food and clothing. Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." That includes the little ones. You can't help but see God in the flesh, that is Jesus, walking around and how he spent time for children, how he made time for children. It's one of my favorite images of Jesus, when he picks up the children in his arms and he spins them around and he loves on them. You see, we've benefited from his kindness, haven't we? We've been blessed. For God bought you with a high price, so you must honor God with your body. We've benefited from it, and we need to share it. I asked a friend of mine, or ours, I should include Renee, who are foster parents that we've got to chance to develop a friendship and interact with. It's part of our support team. You're in this together. And I asked, just tell me about your story. And the shepherds shared their story. They sneaked in here in the back. They're in the back. There's some real heroes. And so, now the pressure's on if I can remember their story since they're right here to verify it. So, no pressure. Just pretend I got it right. No. Their story started with them losing a job and then losing their house. And they had to move in to make ends meet into a trailer park. And there, they got to interact with a family whose grandmother or aunt was raising some kids on her own. Her parents have neglected them. And then as they befriended them and reached out to them, they then were able to get a new job, and they moved here, and they were considering this. And God put them in a church which had was hosting about information for foster care. And that was just some of the steps that brought them. And it was more than that. I'm simplifying it. But the point is, they knew that God had provided for them. God had blessed them and brought them through a huge trial. And now, that's kind of what Julie said, they had room. And they had interacted with some others and had seen the difference that through Sunday school and teaching the church, seeing the difference that a loving family can make. And so they felt this was their call. And they talked to the kids knowing it was part of the kids' decision, and the kids said yes, and now they've been loving little Jade since then. And they're doing an amazing job. And it's not easy. And they'll be the first to tell you. But it's interesting what she wrote. She wrote these words. These kids come into foster care through no fault of their own. And to me, that's the biggest reason why everyone should care and want to help in some way. Some kids just need an adult to believe in them. Some kids need a home. Some need an advocate. But all of them need prayer. They are living the consequences of someone else's actions. They need love and prayers to help them survive as they pick up the pieces of their lives. I think that explains. Another foster mother sent me this message. Sometime I wish more people would understand this. Being a foster parent is hard. Being a foster child is much harder. There are many difficult things about being a foster parent. But when the hard times are here, looking at it as a parental perspective helps me. If my children were ever taken from me and my husband, how would I want them treated? What kind of foster home would I want them to be in? Well, I did everything in my power to get them back. I want to be the foster home for the kids in foster care. I want to be that home. I want to be the safe, loving environment I would want for my children. We're to care for what God cares for. So what's God's answer? What's God's answer to the foster care crisis? It's God's answer to a lot of things. The church. It's the church. It's his people. Who better to understand what it means to welcome somebody with loving arms? Who better to understand this idea of grace and forgiveness and patience than ones who have accepted that? Who better already has a support system set up than the church? It's no accident. The church is God's plan for carrying hope and the message of Christ to the world. And we're part of that redemption story. You know, as I thought about Foster Care Sunday, Orphan Sunday, I reflected on our story. It's no accident that God brought the Mullenses to Georgia. Even though it was a really spiritual moment there at 1 a.m., as I was looking through the references and I saw Albany, Georgia, and said, that's warm, let's go there. To which my wife said, no, but God brought us here. And you've heard our story. I'm not going to retell it, but it's an amazing story about the connections we made that first weekend and just how God was providing. But it's no accident that God called us to here. And then it was not by accident that I happened to be at Chehaw Park and I saw this crazy woman with pink hair trying to watch all her crazy kids run around. And then, like 2 days later, that same crazy woman was at the same drama practice that I was at. And just being my very shy, introverted self, I walked up and said, "Can I sit by you?" And it's no accident that this crazy woman began talking about how they had adopted in foster care and said, "You should think about that." It's no accident that I happened to be a youth minister at the time, and I had the time. I missed those days. Anyway, and then it was no accident that the person she put us in contact with happened to have their training facilities across the street where I worked. You see, we had talked about it before. I don't know how many kids ago it was that we talked about it, but some point in time we had talked about it. And I said no. No. Why would I want to get attached and then have to let him go? I wasn't going to do that to myself. I wasn't going to allow myself to invest time and effort and love and resources and then have to just let him go. So I fought it. But maybe I was hanging around Jesus more and changed my heart. Or maybe it's because I saw Julie could do it, at least I could do it too. And so we prayed about it. We talked about it. We talked to the boys. And one of them at that time was going to have to lose their room. And they said yes. The story, of course, brings us Shay and Wendy. I can't imagine life without them now. I mean, they are definitely Mullins. You see them running around talking to everybody. They are Mullins. But our lives are so much better because of it. And no, it's not easy. No, it's not perfect. No, we've not done it always correctly. But it's been worth it. But maybe, just maybe, did God bring the Mullinses here not just to help save two little girls, but to shepherd a congregation that is full of foster parents of all ages? I don't know. I start to think about that and think about where we're gifted as a church, where we have a lot of young families and where we have the wiser members of the congregation patiently okay with the noise and racket children bring around. Not every church is like that. I think about the support that so many of you have shown us in the Washingtons, from watching our kids to just loving on them, to asking how we're doing, to providing vitamins for our kids that we don't have to buy, just small things. And you did that not because we're the pastor, just because you love kids. And I think we can do that again. Man, we have the support here. I could see us having a small group just kind of just venting and supporting one another through the process. I truly believe that there is at least one or two families that can move and start walking this journey. And I say families, I mean family units. It could be an individual. You know, we've talked about couple weeks ago that were praying for the churches, and I hope you've been praying for the other churches or when you drive by them. We talked about each church is gifted and has a will that God has for them, a purpose. And through our 3 years of foster care, and we're not experts by any means. We've only been doing it for 3 years. It has been amazing how we've been blessed by churches in this community. One church provided a Christmas party for them, including all the rest of my family, which included, of course, getting gifts, but also fake snow, and it was just a neat experience. Another church at a different time, a small church, provided a water day for the kids. There's another church in town which provides every foster child through the NECO organization their own birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese. That ain't cheap. And they make sure they have a cake. What about us? Maybe our niche is to have the actual foster families. Maybe he's calling you. Maybe he's calling you. Maybe he's calling you. But you think, well, I don't know about that. What if you do what's called respite care, where you get the training as foster parents and then you open your home for a week or maybe just a weekend for those times that the families need someone who is licensed to watch them. Many of you have done that for us unofficially. Thanks. But some of you went through the training, Brittany Brock, to be that for us, because we have to have a licensed caretaker. It's what the church is about. We must care about foster care because we are imitators of the God who cares. I don't know if that's God's calling on your life. I'm not going to pretend that each and every one of you are called to this. But more of you are called to it than you may think. And so here's the challenge. I'm going to challenge you to come attend the movie tonight. It's a short film, 20 minutes. Be open. Be open to the Holy Spirit's leading. Now, he may be, when you're open in this, yes, foster care may be where he's leading you. It may be something else. But be open to his leading. See where he's moving, where you can walk along with him. Man, it took me a while to say yes. It took God moving me across the country to help me know what our family's calling was. Be open. I challenge you as a family unit to once a day, some point in time in your crazy day, and I understand how hard that will be. I can't imagine where the Mullins is going to squeeze us in, but we're going to try. Simply pray, God, break our hearts for what breaks yours. What is God calling your family to? I truly believe that God calls, yes, individuals, God calls churches, but he also calls family. Your family may be called to help with the homeless. Your family may be called to work at the animal shelter. Your family may be called to work with senior adults. Your family may be called to do some sort of role in foster care. Would it be the hands and feet? The church is made up of families. We're a large family broke up with smaller families. If you want to learn more, there's these websites. You can get them from me. Snap a picture. If you're thinking about it, you feel maybe talk to someone who foster care. You've got 3 families in here today. Contact the fostering organization. The one we now use is NECO. One of the representatives from NECO will be here tonight that you can ask questions for. NECO is not the only one, and I'm not saying that this is the one you have to use. It's the one that we've found to be a blessing we've plugged into now that Lutheran Services is no longer offering the service. we are a church that cares. I mean, we just told you, please bring some clothes for some kids. And we're not a huge church, but look at what's out here. Look at that. Man, one of the things we get right is we love children. I would have never thought to preach on this. I'll be honest. Yes, it's who we are, it's what we do, but, it's kind of like, I don't want to toot our own horn, or it's just kind of, But God had a plan. For CIY to show a video, for Abby to grab a card, for Jennifer to have a small group of teens who are doing mission work, to bring this together. It's a God thing. My prayer has been that there are two families who will feel called to plug into foster care, one form or fashion. That's my prayer. I don't know if it's God's will or not, but that's what I'm asking. He says be specific, and I've been praying for that. And so you may be that answered prayer. What I'd like to do is I'm going to pray over us. I'm going to pray a simple prayer. And so if you would bow, or if you feel comfortable that way, you don't have to. Prayer, there's no right posture. But I'm going to pause now. I'm going to pray over us as a church family, over you. God, we are your children. God, I'm going to ask that you break our hearts for what breaks yours. I pray this in Jesus' name. Where we're at in the process with our girls is we are waiting for a court date. We've been waiting for a court date since August. I don't know how long we'll have to wait. But in the steps, we're waiting for that court date so that it can move towards adoption. That's our prayer. We feel that's where God's leading. But what if it wasn't the case? About the same time, God gave me a book to read. It's a little book about a farming couple. They had a great life together. They lived simply. They were happy. They didn't have a desire to have children. And a little boy shows up in their yard. And they begin taking care of this little child who's not able to communicate. He's not able to talk. And they have to work through all this. And eventually they've come to love the child. But just the time they got really attached, it was the family had figured out where he had gone. And they have to let him go. But he leaves his old shoes there. And the book, in the last chapter, has the young boy coming back. He's an adult, and he's done well, and he goes back to thank them. And when he walks into their house, in the hallway is shelves full of old shoes, representing every child that they helped and sent on. It doesn't say that they adopted. They just loved and made an impact. So I don't want you to get the idea that every child will end up in adoption. There's a lot that need adopted. They're just ready for a loving family. As I think about adoption, I think I'm going to get a better understanding of it once the girls' names are changed from Carden to Mullins. That will be an amazing day. It's a day that we long for. We hope would come. Still hoping it will come. But there's something about their names being changed. We can now spank them. But they get to have a new name. A new name. But that, as amazing that's going to be, and as life-changing it's going to be, is nothing compared to the adoption that Jesus offered by dying for us, for every one of us. That's the thing. Christianity, how it's different than other religions, is it's not about things you do or don't do. It actually says he's paid the price. Caleb has been adopted into God's family. You get a chance to belong. And it's not about the local church family. That's important, and that's part of it. But it's about the bigger family, part of God's family. And the way that God loved to describe it, the way Jesus loved to describe it, was this idea of adoption, that you are sons and daughters with full rights, full inheritance. That the same thing he promised Jesus, he promises you. There's not like, well, you kind of slid in. No, you have access to his love and grace and forgiveness. And that is what the call is for you to give your life. And you do that as you saw two young people willing to do today, where they started with a belief and admitted that they've sinned and stated out loud who they believe Jesus is, and then were baptized into his name, and now they must live for him. Man, if you have not been adopted by the perfect Father, you are missing out. You're missing out of hope. You're missing out of love and acceptance, belonging, and I could go on. I would love to talk to you about that. I would love for you today to be adopted by him. But he doesn't force. It's where it changes a little bit. Foster care, these kids have no choice. But when it comes to God, each and every one of us have a choice.